The Indigenous men were signing up literally in droves to go overseas to fight for Canada.
Remembrance Day ceremonies were held across the country and here in Winnipeg Monday, honoring the First Nations, Inuit and Métis who have a long and proud tradition of military service here in Canada.
I'm a survivor of day school, residential school, and I carried the 60 scoop for 6 years.
Melvin Swan spent 12 years in the military. He spoke Monday at a commemoration event for National Indigenous Veterans Day in Winnipeg. Swan shared stories about his service and touched on the challenges Indigenous members of the armed forces face during their time in active duty and upon return to Canada after combat.
My claim to fame is a human rights case against the Canadian Forces in 1994.
Swan filed a formal complaint with the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal over racism and abuse he experienced from his unit over his Indigenous ancestry during his time in service. Swan says he won the court case and was also present when the decision was made to create a day to honor Indigenous veterans in Canada.
When Aboriginal Veterans Day was created, I was there as the National Vice President for this organization.
We had 12,000 First Nations Indigenous peoples who served in the armed forces during the 2 world wars, which is an astronomical number compared to the population.
Robert Falcon-Ouellette, warrant officer with the Winnipeg Rifles, says it's a strong statement when Indigenous service members who fought for Canada in Korea, World War I and World War II were asked to die for a country that wouldn't even let them vote.
Even after having served your country. And there are still people alive today who did not have the right to vote, such as my father.
Ouellette called the situation complex when asked about being a member of the military unit that historically fought against and killed his own family members. Ouellette says the issue he faces as an Indigenous person is not to let that history overtake his ability to change things for the better in the here and now and for 7 generations to come.
For instance, forming this Indigenous drum group inside the regiment that was fighting our people directly over 150 years ago is a profound statement.
Ouellette says the Canadian forces he serves with today is very different than the one he joined 25 years ago and highlights the creation of an Indigenous hand drum group made up of unit personnel that meets once a week to participate in traditional activities celebrating Indigenous culture with pride.
And it's supported by the chain of command. It's actually supported by the Canadian Forces. Our commanding officer helped us start the group.
The Prime Minister acknowledged those who served our country on Monday, touching on how Indigenous veterans have not always been treated equally. A statement reads in part, "Today serves as a reminder of their important contributions and bravery. And this year, the national flag on the Peace Tower in Ottawa and on all Government of Canada buildings and establishments across the country is being lowered to honor and acknowledge the sacrifices Indigenous veterans have made for our country." In Winnipeg, Mark Neufeld, City News.